So I've finally gotten around to doing some benchmarking for the new Mac Mini M4 Pro, and I've been comparing it against a custom-built PC and my old MacBook Pro. And while I was at it, I've also compared it against a few mobile devices. Now, over here, you're going to see some of the specs for these devices, and we're going to be scrolling to the right. And as we scroll, we're going to cover the specs for each device first, and then we're going to cover the actual results for the benchmarks. So I added the mobile devices in here just because I had some extra devices running around, and I thought it would be interesting to compare them, but the real comparison is mostly going to be to compare this PC and the MacBook Pro against the new Mac Mini with the M4 Pro. So let's start here. Now I'm going to scroll over just to show you what I've collected. So here I have basic specs and stuff. Scroll on over. We've done some Cinebench benchmarking. Not on I couldn't get it to work on Linux. It's supposed to it's not supposed to run there, but you can get it to work with Wine. I didn't have any luck, so I gave up on that for the time being. And Cinebench, as far as I know, just does not have mobile versions, so it's missing for those. But I did get Geekbench to work on all of them, so did some CPU benchmarking and some GPU benchmarking. Now in this video, we're not covering the AI benchmarks, but I have done some AI benchmarking, and I'm planning to include those in a future video. So yeah, I have those. I just felt like it would overcomplicate things to put the AI benchmarks into this video, so I put them on a separate sheet. Now let's start out here with the systems that we're going to be doing. So I put the name of the system. This is basically just a host name here that I came up with just to kind of differentiate the systems. And here I have the type of system. So got the Mac Mini 2024. CPU is the M4 Pro. This is the higher version of the M4 Pro 2 with 14 cores. Now I'm comparing that against a MacBook Pro. This is the 16-inch from late 2019. It's got an i7 in it, so it was one of the lower spec versions, not one with the i9. And then here I have a custom PC, so one host name for two PCs. That's because this is one PC. I booted it up with Windows 11 and with Linux. So this was Ubuntu Linux I booted it with, and I compared the benchmarks on both of those. So we can also compare Linux versus Windows. That's also interesting. This one also has an i7, still a pretty reasonably powerful i7, but it's a little bit older. It's a few years old at this point. So in any case, let's start out with the CPUs. We got so our Mac Mini has an M4 Pro. MacBook Pro's got the i7. This is a mobile i7, and now basically the equivalent i7, but a desktop version in the custom PC. So in the desktop, we got 8 CPU cores, and each core only has a single thread, so 8 cores, 8 threads, whereas the MacBook Pro had 6 cores but 12 threads. Now, the Mac Mini has 14 CPU cores and 0 threads, so it just doesn't use threading, so it just has 14 real cores. That's just how ARM PCs. That's how ARM CPUs work. They don't use threads. Now threads, when a core is free, a thread allows that core to be swapping between two different workloads. But if you're really pushing something, or going for a high constant usage, I should probably get into the distinction more in a future video, but yeah, you're basically not, threads aren't going to be that useful. It's only if the core is not being fully utilized. So for day-to-day usage, core threads can actually be pretty good, but they're not good for every situation. In any case, that's only an Intel thing here. That's not an ARM thing. So if you look down here, we have 3 smartphones, and interestingly, it's just interesting to see how these stack up. So got a Snapdragon 670, an A14 Bionic, and an M1. Now M1, that's pretty similar to what you get in some of the new Apple Silicon Macs, and it's kind of going to be interesting to compare that against the M4 Pro. Anyways, we got 8 cores, 6 cores, and 8 cores again. No threads for any of these. Now as far as RAM, got 64 gigs in the Mac Mini. Only 16 gigs in the MacBook Pro, which is holding it back a lot. If we had doubled this, I could have gotten quite a bit more life out of this thing. The PC has 32 gigs and is serving me well for now. I kind of like to upgrade it, but I'd like to upgrade it, but I really don't need to. Google Pixel phone, only 4 gigs, the lowest out of all of them, 6 gigs in the iPhone, and 8 gigs in the iPad Air. Now, it's amazing how low this is a pretty good amount of RAM, and that used to be not too long ago. That was pretty good just for a PC, but now all these desktop systems have, it's just a huge difference between these, right? Desktop versus mobile. Now, let's scroll a little bit to the right here, and we're going to look at the GPU and the GPU cores / ALU. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to read a couple of these notes I put down here. Now, first off, before I forget, the CPU, so these i7s are 9th gen Coffee Lake CPUs. So both of these are Coffee Lake 9th gen. Now, a note about the GPU cores. Before I talk about the GPU cores, the M4 Pro with 20 GPU cores has, so there can be some confusion between GPU cores between the M4 Pro and the between Apple Silicon and NVIDIA, basically. So you'll notice like the actual cores in the M4 Pro, it only has 20 cores, quote unquote cores, whereas the the NVIDIA CPU has over 2,000 cores. So you'd think it would be way better, and they generally tend to be better, but these are vaguely equivalent, and actually you'll see the results. The Apple Silicon came out on top in this case. Now, so this note is basically 20 GPU cores. It means it also has 320 execution units, or EUs, and it actually has 2,560 ALUs, and those are arithmetic logic units. And so those should be the equivalent to the 2,560 CUDA cores on the GTX 1080. So if you look here, generally the GTX 1080, the NVIDIA GTX 1080 in the custom PC has 2,560. It calls them CUDA cores. These CUDA cores are basically they're very, very simple components. They're basically an ALU, an arithmetic logic unit. So they are the equivalent to the ALU in the M4 Pro. So you see here, it has 20 cores, which are split into 320 execution units, which are then further split into 2560 ALUs, which just so happens to be the same number as the GTX 1080, which is 2560. So they basically have the same number of ALUs. Now, given these function a little bit differently, and this is not, this is comparing apples and oranges. They're a little bit different. The way they work and the architecture and stuff is different, but this is a closer comparison to compare the number of ALUs to the number of CUDA cores. So that would be the closest comparison you get if you want to just compare them, based on the numbers, right? So usually, when you look at the specs for the Mac Mini, or anything Apple Silicon, they're just going to tell you, oh yeah, we have 20 GPU cores, and you'll see that number is really, really small compared to the number of cores commonly advertised for NVIDIA hardware. But really, those are not the numbers you should compare. The numbers you should compare are the ALU, which I found this on the you're not going to see this on the the advertisements and stuff for the Apple products. You're going to see it I found this on the actual Wikipedia site. So you can find some nice charts with these values for different M1 processors. So anyways, let's talk about the GPUs on these. So the GPU on the Mac Mini is the M4 Pro. It's built into the system on a chip here. So M4 Pro, and on my MacBook Pro it has 2 GPUs, and we're going to show you the specs for each of the results for each of those. So it has an Intel UHD 630 that's built into the i7 CPU. Now you're also going to have a Radeon Pro 5300M. So that's your Radeon CPU. That's your Radeon GPU, and it's a whole lot faster than this Intel GPU. And then in the custom PC, we have a GTX 1080, which is a lot older than it's a lot older than the CPU that's in this machine. So I originally built this machine without a GPU, and then I upgraded it to to the 1080, and I basically was able to acquire this for free, and it's still even to this day in 2024, this is still a relatively decent GPU, even though it's pretty old. It was powerful for its time, and it still holds up relatively well. Although there are much more powerful GPUs out there today, and I could just as well upgrade this. So even the CPU in this is actually getting it's a few years old, but the GPU is even older than the CPU, so they don't quite match up, and both of them are out of date at this time. So we're not also important to note, this custom PC, this is not the latest and greatest hardware, so we're not comparing the latest and greatest hardware to this Mac Mini. The Mac Mini is latest and greatest, whereas the MacBook Pro is pretty old, and the custom PC is also pretty old. Now, also with these mobile devices, also apples and oranges, they're not equivalent devices. They're just what I had, so I'm comparing them because I thought it would be interesting, but all of these devices are kind of disparate, and they are not it's not a fair comparison with all of these. It just shows you, I guess the takeaways are to show you, what you would get if you were to upgrade from something this old to something this new, and basically to show you what the equivalent PC would be. Now, getting back to the GPUs, so on the Pixel you got the Adreno 615, on the the iPhone you got the A14 Bionic, and the iPad you got the M1, right? So anyways, moving along here, let's take a look at the cores, because I only talked about a couple of them. So all right, this one, you got the 20 cores, 320 EUs, and 2560 ALUs. And that matches up with the GTX 1080 right here. But you also, I mentioned the MacBook Pro has two GPUs in it, and so these are these are the ALUs. It has 192 for the Intel GPU and 1280 for the Radeon. So this is vaguely around half the number of GPU cores or ALUs as the new Mac Mini and the GTX 1080. And also worth pointing out, this GPU this is a whole separate device added on to this PC, whereas this GPU, it's basically built into the CPU. So keep that in mind. It's not a whole separate unit. This is the amount of power you have baked right into the same thing. That's the same system on a chip that is this the CPU, the GPU and CPU all in one thing. Now this one, I think I had some trouble finding numbers for the Google Pixel for the Adreno 615, but I think it's supposed to be 256 ALUs, but I couldn't get some solid numbers that I trust on that one. Maybe some more research, but I probably won't look into that any further. The A14 Bionic, basically same thing with cores, EUs, and ALUs. So basically the ALUs come out to 512. So significantly lower, and still beats the Pixel, but the iPhone is much lower than any of these desktop devices. Now the iPad Air actually is pretty good. It's still, as far as GPU power, it is lower. In terms of the number of cores, it's lower, has 1024, so that's going to be lower than any of these, but it's almost as good as the MacBook Pro. So let's keep on scrolling over here. Now we're going to talk about some AI components. These are the neural engines, or the neural processing units, the NPU, and we're going to actually show you the benchmarks for this in a future video, not in this video. We've excluded the benchmarks for it, but let's talk about the specs. So the M4 Pro, 16 cores. Now there is no NPU in either the custom PC or the MacBook Pro. They're Intel based and just did not come with an NPU at all. So those are going to be stuck using either the GPU or the CPU for anything AI related. Now this one, it does have an NPU. It's the Hexagon 685, and that one I could not get some info on the cores. Just had trouble finding good information on the specs for this device. Kind of surprising, but it's like they just don't want to show off the components in the device. I would think they would want to. Any case, I could mostly just find marketing material, but no solid specs on this. Now the A14 Bionic, well documented, 16 NPU cores. And the M1, same deal, 16 NPU cores. Now, for our first benchmark, the Cinebench benchmark. This one had some surprising results. Now, no Cinebench for Linux, no Cinebench for these mobile devices. But, and one thing I should just to give you an idea, the difference between Cinebench and Geekbench. Geekbench tends to take more practical tests and, average them out and do more practical real-world tests, where Cinebench will push the device to its actual limit and just try to overload the device. Hopefully I'm describing this in a way that makes sense, but it basically tries to push the device to the max that it's capable of and get the maximum usage out of the device to see what it's really capable of, whereas that might not match real world usage. So Geekbench is a little more flexible and will show you more like real world results. Now, I was still a little surprised by this, and from the quick searching around I found, other people did not get these same results for Cinebench. Now, I was thinking maybe there's something wrong with my this specific MacBook Pro, or maybe it's running into some other issue. I have not discovered why I'm getting these numbers yet. If anyone else knows why or has any ideas, let me know. Something else must have been holding it back, but these were too much of a difference. Now, I know there's supposed to be a big difference between, this and the M4, the Mac Mini, but it shouldn't have that much of a difference between this and the desktop. I know the desktop has should be a little bit more powerful, but not by this much. And the Geekbench stuff for real world usage did not show such a huge difference. So in any case, single core usage on the Mac Mini was give us a 2,155, and compare that to the MacBook Pro, which was just 68. Now that's a huge difference. And if you even compare it against the the custom PC with an i7, that's a 1,257. Now, this one is about half of the Mac Mini's power, but according to Cinebench. But this guy here should at least be on par with this i7. These are both i7s, so they should both be pretty close, and they're not. Like, this is like absurdly small of a number. So something's wrong with it. Maybe for some reason the CPU just does not benchmark very well when the RAM is getting eaten up, and maybe the RAM was getting eaten up. That's my only guess. Either that or there's something wrong with it, and maybe the CPU, maybe it needs new thermal paste or something. I don't know. Something's wrong with this. Something's wrong with these results. And in the quick Googling for other people's results, I have seen them get numbers closer to what I would expect, closer to, something in the thousands like this. So single core results, pretty surprised with that. The CPU multi-core results for Cinebench were, here we have 22,543 for the M4 Pro, and on my custom PC with the i7, we had 7,365. So it's kind of expected. It's much lower. So, this Mac Mini with the M4 Pro is basically blowing this out of the water. It is, in terms of raw CPU power, it's totally destroying my custom built PC. It's a whole lot better, a lot better performance, but yeah, this for whatever reason, getting a really low score. So it's up a little bit because it's multi-core, but still a really ridiculously low score on this MacBook Pro. Something's wrong here, right? So not sure about that. Now, the ratio is still what I would expect. So the MP ratio is like the ratio is how much of an improvement you get from single core to multi-core, and you get a pretty good number here. Has some pretty good multi-core. It's pretty good at multi-core workloads for the Mac Mini. The two i7s basically have a pretty almost the same ratio, even though basically the reason the ratio is the same for this is because both single and multi-core were really low, but they still had the same ratio. And this is, it's not a terrible ratio, but it's not as good as the Mac Mini. Now, let's move along to Geekbench results. So these are going to give me, let's just move on to the ignore the GPU stuff for now, and let's just look at Geekbench CPU. Now, single core, we've got the Mac, and these Geekbench does break things down into the individual tests. There are a lot more tests, and I'm going to cover these I'm going to cover each of these systems by themselves in separate videos, and I'm going to go into how much time it took to run different tests, like processing images and doing things like that, different real-world tasks. There's a lot of detail on that, and I'm going to go over all those details for each system individually in future videos. And for a few of these systems, I decided to compare them one-on-one. When I'm comparing all the systems at once, I didn't want to line them all up because it would just get way too confusing and mixed up. So I'm going to do one system versus the other system, and I'm going to do comparisons where I could just compare two systems at a time in detail. So there's a lot more detail than what I'm showing you here. But I just wanted to give you like the final results and the final score just to compare all the systems together. So this is more like the overview video. So in any case, for single core Geekbench, so obviously still the Mac Mini is the winner here. Now it beats the Mac, so you got 3,825 versus the 1,422 on the MacBook Pro. And so you're going to get some better single core performance for anything that does not make use of multiple cores. Now you're going to get slightly better performance. This is actually what I did expect. Slightly better performance on the the custom PC, just because it's a PC, has better cooling, and so on. And it's a desktop version of the CPU, not a mobile version. So Windows 11, we had we had 1564. And on Linux, on the same thing, we had 1769. So Linux, we're getting slightly better performance on Linux, and both of these are a little bit better than the MacBook Pro with a similar CPU, but it's not such a huge difference that there's something wrong with the MacBook. This is actually exactly what I would expect from a laptop versus a desktop. So this makes a lot of sense, and the difference between this and the Mac Mini, obviously Apple Silicon, and it's beating these things out by a lot. It's by far the most powerful CPU. Now, other interesting thing to point out, let's take a look at the mobile devices. So lowest one is this Google Pixel. It's really, really low and weak in terms of single core power. Now, if you take a look at the iPhone in terms of single core power, it beat out the MacBook Pro. So this is one reason why it was good to compare mobile devices. While this old Android device, now this is not fair. I know there are a lot of Android devices that are much more powerful and can basically compete with the newer iPhones, and this is not even the newest iPhone, but the newer ones are more powerful, and there are Android devices that absolutely can compete with these. So this is not a fair comparison, Android versus iPhone. In any case, this iPhone is beating both of these i7s, and whether it be the custom PC or the MacBook Pro, it's beating both of the Intel processors. And the iPad Air is so this came about kind of about the same time as this iPhone, and it has the M1 in it. So M1 versus the what was it, the A14 Bionic. They seem to be vaguely equivalent. Now you're going to see higher performance in the multi-core, so the M1 is better for multi-core results, and it does have. So what did we have here? We have fewer. We have two more cores on the M1, but any case, so yes, single core, they were about equivalent. So the cores are between the Bionic chip and the M1. The cores were about, the single core performance is about the same, but better multi-core performance. It does have two additional cores, so that would probably almost account for that. And so anyways, both of these are both more powerful than the i7s, but not as powerful, obviously, as the M4 Pro. Now, for multi-core performance, you're going to see you're going to see a huge difference. You have this is by far the most powerful. The M4 Pro, 22,502 is the score, versus for the MacBook Pro we have over 5,000, and for the the custom PC, we have over 6,000. Now we had slightly better multi-core performance on Linux versus Windows, but and both of them performed a little bit better than the the mobile i7 on my MacBook Pro. This is all to be expected, and obviously for multi-core performance, the M4 Pro basically blows them all out of the water. Basically is better than any of these systems. Now, here we have some reasonably not so. It's not too terrible, but keep in mind this is multi-core. It's still way lower than all the others in multi-core performance. But there's the Google Pixel, the lowest. Now, the iPhone is pretty reasonably okay, but when it comes to multi-core performance, it is no longer beating out the MacBook Pro's i7, and it is definitely no longer beating out the custom PC's i7. So the i7 on the custom PC is beating the iPhone for multi-core performance, whereas with single core, the iPhone was beating out all of the i7s. Now it is not quite beating them all out. It's not beating any of them. It's close for the MacBook, and it's getting beaten pretty well with the custom PC. But the M1 processor is while the iPhone is not beating these, the M1 processor on the iPad Air is beating out all of these i7s, and the only one it is not beating is the Mac Mini with the M4 Pro. So this is the Geekbench CPU single core and multi-core performance test benchmarks. So let's move along here to Geekbench GPU benchmarks, right? So for the GPUs, this is a little bit mixed up here, so I put these in different columns because the tests are going to be based on your graphics framework. So now these systems can run different it's not that they're all restricted to only using these, but these are the more common frameworks, and like we're missing DirectX here. Like we have Vulkan, Metal, OpenCL, but we have no DirectX, and there are others. So you for any given workload, you may or may not be using a different a different framework. But these are the ones that were available for comparison, and some systems. Like for example, you're only going to see Metal on the Apple products, and you are going to see Vulkan or OpenCL on others. And some of the Apple products can do both Metal and OpenCL. So, anyways, it's a little bit mixed up here. Any case. And this one, we had 2 GPUs. I tested on both of the GPUs, so the built-in Intel GPU versus the Radeon GPU in the MacBook Pro. And obviously the Radeon gives us much better results. It's a much more powerful GPU. So anyways, let's take a look at, the M4 Pro gave us the best results out of everything when using Metal. So with the Metal... With using Metal, it's a 108,000, right? Now with OpenCL, it was only 69,000, a little over 69,000, which still beats out everything else. So whether it's using Metal or OpenCL, it is the clear winner. Now the custom PC running Linux is almost at the point where it can beat it. Yeah, so the second in line is custom PC with Linux. Vulkan, using the Vulkan framework, it had 64,000, almost 65,000, and using OpenCL, it had over 62,000, right? Now, let's see here. So for our running Windows on the custom PC with OpenCL, we have 53, well over 50, almost 54,000. Whereas Vulkan was a little over 19,000. So Vulkan is, when you on Windows, it's much lower than on Linux, but I don't believe that's supposed to be very popular on Windows systems. On Windows systems, you're not going to be using Vulkan as much. Any case, if we could run like a DirectX test, a test with DirectX on Windows, I suspect it may be more comparable to the values we're seeing with Linux. So this is Windows versus Linux. So we're getting better results on Linux. Now, this is different from what I've seen when actually running games. I've had better performance on Windows now a lot of people report better performance on certain games using Linux versus Windows. Now, it is worth pointing out on Linux, we are using the proprietary NVIDIA drivers, not the open source drivers, which have better performance, but running actual games, like for example, when I can run Minecraft totally fine on both Windows and Linux, but when I try to run Minecraft on Linux and I try to use OBS to record my screen, it basically basically screeches to a halt and it barely moves at all. So I can't run OBS and Minecraft at the same time for Linux. Now with Windows, with Windows 11, it was running flawlessly. So that was a real world workload where Windows gave me better performance and Linux was not. So like to look into those performance issues a little bit more. I still have yet to figure that out or see what's going on with Linux, but according to the benchmarks, Linux is doing better, and some people have a lot of people report better gaming performance on Linux. On the games that do work, I know there are some issues getting things to work on Linux sometimes. So anyways. So yeah, that's Linux versus Windows, and both of them, regardless of the framework you use, are lesser than the MacBook or rather the Mac Mini. So the Mac Mini, whether you're running Metal or OpenCL, it's still the winner. Now, if we're comparing OpenCL, just to have an apples to apples comparison, we did compare that to the custom PC on both of these. With the GTX 1080, and yeah, so this is apples to apples because it's OpenCL, and the Mac Mini still beats it using OpenCL, but once you switch over to Metal, all of a sudden the number jumps from 69,000 up to 108,000. That's a huge jump, and that's because I think this is because Metal is Apple's framework and it's better optimized for Apple's CPUs. So when you're using an Apple CPU together with an Apple framework, you're going to get some ridiculous results here. This is way faster. So this one is a little bit. This is the winner by a little bit. It's still the clear winner, but once you jump up to using Metal, this is way better. So yeah, you're getting the M4 Pro is definitely beating the GTX 1080. Now it's been working out pretty well for real life. So far, I've only used this Mac Mini for both No Man's Sky and Minecraft. It runs pretty well for both of those. No Man's Sky is more CPU bound than GPU bound. It's been working great, but not a great test of the GPU for real world usage. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this MacBook Pro. So you see here with the Intel, it's only 6,000, way lower than any of these other results. Except the mobile results. We'll talk about those in a bit, but 6,000, not even close to comparable with any of the other desktop systems. But once you start comparing the Radeon GPU, you have 33,000 on Metal, which is what it's more optimized for. Now the Intel processor is actually less good on OpenCL, and the Radeon processor also less good on OpenCL. So 23,000, so 4,000 and 23,000 for OpenCL, and 6,000, 33,000 for Metal. Now that's for the Intel and the Radeon CPUs. So they're getting to be kind of okay. So it's okay performance in comparison. It's about half of the performance you'll get on the GTX 1080 on the custom PC, and it's far beneath the Mac Mini. So for GPU usage, the MacBook Pro, the old Intel MacBook Pro, still doesn't even come even close to the Mac Mini, which is to be expected. But it's also about half of the performance as you would get with basically we have an old Intel based PC with an even older GPU, and this GPU is still about double the performance of the Radeon GPU in the MacBook. But I think this is still pretty fair because keep in mind this is a mobile this is a laptop, so laptop GPUs, you can only expect so much performance. I think this is still pretty fair, but it's definitely not going to get as much performance as the desktop system. Now, last thing we're going to cover is the mobile devices. Now, obviously, Google Pixel's pretty low for GPU. It only had the Vulkan test, and it's just pretty low results. Now, for the iPhone and the iPad, no OpenCL for these. We only had Metal. We only had the Metal framework to compare with. So the iPhone, 16,000. So that's pretty low. It's lower than the MacBook. It's lower than any of them. It's lower than the MacBook, lower than the PC, and definitely way lower than the Mac Mini. But given it's a phone, it's still pretty reasonably okay for a phone. But yeah, it's not anywhere near as good as those desktop systems. Now, for the iPad, this is actually comparable. It's still lower than the results you're going to get with the custom desktop, and it's actually higher than you would get with the MacBook. So the iPad Air does beat out the MacBook, but it does not beat the custom PC with the GTX 1080 for GPU performance. And obviously, it's still getting beaten by the Mac Mini. So there you go. There's your GPU performance. Some of you may have found this video. If you watched to this point, I guess you found this stuff pretty interesting, and you like seeing, listening to someone talk about numbers and performance. If otherwise, if you find this boring, you probably didn't make it this far in the video. So, in any case, you're going to want to stay tuned for. I'm going to go into more detail on these in future. This is partially dependent on how much people like this video, but my plan is I have a whole list of other videos coming up really soon. So I want to compare each of these systems individually. So I'd like to compare them side by side. So I have a whole list of videos where I'm going to compare one-on-one, just so I can show you the details, like, hey, how fast can they render an image, how fast can they run different real-world workloads. So Geekbench gives you detailed reports comparing each of those, so I'm going to compare them one-on-one, and I'm going to also do individual videos where I'll just take one of these devices and go through all the results for that device and show you how it works in real life workloads. So stay tuned for those videos. And also we have a ton of other more interesting videos. We cover a lot of things from hardware to software, from Apple to Intel to Linux, Windows, all sorts of stuff, electronics, Raspberry Pis, robots, 3D printing, networking, coding, all sorts of interesting stuff you don't want to miss out on. So definitely hit the subscribe button, and also hit the little bell icon so you actually do get notified when we come out with new videos. And you might want to leave a comment down below if you've had different results or you're curious about any of these results. And if you have any idea why any ideas as to why I might be getting these results right here, because I've seen other people get different results for this. If you have any idea about that, leave a comment down below letting me know what the possible causes might be and what I might be able to do to get more accurate or better results with this. So yeah, leave a comment down below. And also stay tuned. I will probably be benchmarking some, if enough people like this type of video, I'm probably going to be benchmarking some other systems. I have a bunch of other systems laying around. I'm going to probably try to benchmark those as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Might want to give me a thumbs up. And that's about it for today. So thanks for watching, and we will see you guys on that next video.